Hi everyone, this is Selena Kraus and welcome to another Hero Arts card video. In today's video, we're gonna make a birthday card using the Confetti bold prints. Along with the Hero Lifestyle collection, we're gonna be using the Hero Lifestyle Picnic Day fancy dies, the Lifestyle Form fancy dies, and the Hero Lifestyle faces. So let's get started. We're gonna start by ink blending a few of the Hero Arts reactive inks onto a piece of Dove White cardstock. I'll be using the Lemon Drop, Creamsicle, and Taffy. I'm starting with the Lemon Drop, and this will be on the top. Then in the middle, I'll do the Creamsicle or Creamsicle, and then Taffy. So I'm going back and forth with the colors to make sure that I have nice transition between the colors. I decided to start with the ink blending of the background first, so I have some time for that background to dry before we stamp the confetti bold prints and emboss in white. Here I'm using piece of post-it tape so I don't leave fingerprints on my background. And I'm going here back and forth to make sure that everything is blended out nicely and we have subtle transition between the colors. And one more time with the Lemon Drop. I think I am satisfied with the background, and I will put the background to the side and move to die cutting all the elements. I'm using few colors of Hero Arts cardstock. I use Arctic Papaya, Peony, Dove White, Chestnut, and Peach Black. So since I needed a skin color for the main form, I decided to go with Copic markers, or you can use any coloring medium of your choice to color that the body of the paper doll. I'm just doing quick coloring and quick blending. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're gonna put some of the clothes, the hair, and other accessories on top. I like coloring my die cuts because that way I can do any custom color that I would like to the die cuts to have, and I'm not dependent on to having color cardstock or not. So I'm just adding the second shade of this peachy color, and then I'm adding the lightest shade and kind of blending everything together. So for the accessories, I decided to go with colored cardstock, but we're gonna add some reactive ink. So for the dress, I'm using Peony cardstock and I'm adding Taffy reactive ink on top and the bottom to create a little bit depth and dimension to the little dress. So I think that looks good there. Now I decided to add little dots and lines using white gel pen to add a little bit more detail and interest to the dress. For the kite, I decided the base, the tail of the kite, to be from Peony cardstock, and I want it to be a little bit darker, so I added the Taffy reactive ink. Next, I'm ink blending some Creamsicle and Taffy onto the Papaya kite. You can see they're cut lines. They're not full cut lines, but they're kind of paper layering. However, I will cut along those lines and separate each of the kites, only the Arctic and the Papaya, into 4 pieces and then piece them all together onto the Peony cardstock. I'm adding some root beer reactive ink onto the hair. So now let's put the paper doll together. I'm using the Hero Arts Precision Glue to add all the elements to the base form. So I think that looks good. Now we're going to add the shoes. I cut out the shoes from Peach Black cardstock. And I'm using jewel picking tool to pick the smaller elements to add them to the doll, or you can use tweezers. Next is the hair. I'm gonna start with the top part and then the bottom, but before we move on to the hair, I'm gonna put the kite together. As I mentioned, I'm cutting each of those two kites in 4 pieces along the cut lines there, and then I'll adhere them together, kind of piece them together, so we have 2 different colors on the kite, and then the tail, it's a 3rd color. So I'm adding the Arctic that we had Pool Party blended into it, and next I'm adding the Papaya, and then on the top I'll reverse the colors. So I think that looks good. Like I did for the dress, I'll do the same with the kite. I'm adding little dots and lines onto the kite for a little bit more interest and creating a little bit more pattern. I'm adding little lines, highlights on the shoes. So I think that looks good. Okay, now let's move on to adhering the hair. I'm adding some of the Hero Arts Precision adhesive glue on the hair. And then for the braids, I'll add little dot on the top of the braid and adhere it behind the ear, so the braids will come from the back. Before I adhere the braids, I decided to stamp the little face from Hero Lifestyle Faces. I'm positioning that in my Misty tool, and I will use the Hero Arts Intensified Black ink to stamp the face. Before I stamp directly onto the image, I decided to stamp on vellum to make sure that my positioning of the image was okay. Since I have pretty much all of the doll put together, I didn't want to mess it up. Next, I decided to add the freckles, and I'll use the Kappa Joe shadow ink to stamp those. Okay, so we have that ready. Now we're going to add the braids. As I mentioned just a second ago, I will add little dot of adhesive on the top of the braid and adhere it behind the ear and pull it to the front. Then I'm holding with the tweezers until the glue dries a little bit, and that's nice and secure, and I'm doing the same for the second braid. Okay, I will just set that aside to dry. While that dries, I pulled out my original Misty, and I will stamp the background onto our ink blended background piece. So I'm using the embossing, clear embossing and watermark ink. Here you see that I do reverse. My stamp is not on the door, but is on the base of the Misty, and then I use adhesive to attach that piece of paper, cardstock onto the door of the Misty. I found this method to be much easier when stamping on backgrounds. Also helps with positioning where I want. For this background it doesn't matter, but when we have different backgrounds which are more kind of symmetrical, it helps with positioning. Next, I did apply the detailed white embossing powder on top, and I'm heat setting it with my heat tool. Okay, so that looks good. So now it's time to decide for a sentiment. I decided to use the Happy Thanks and cut XL. I will only use the die cuts, and here I already had cut 3 of the happy from pitch black cardstock, and I layer them together to have a little bit more dimension. Next, I'm using the happy birthday sentiment from Sending Love Mail stamp set. I'm stamping it a couple times with the embossing and watermark ink onto pitch black cardstock, and embossing with detailed white embossing powder. So I'm melting that embossing powder, and next I will die cut that sentiment using the strip die from the Bouquet Accessories Fancy Dies. So this is longer, the die is longer than our sentiment, so I'll just trim that tail to the left. So by magic of YouTube, it's already die cut, and I'm trimming that side there so it fits nicely. Decided to flip it over here. I realized that the pink is supposed to be on the bottom. Next, I'm trimming the panel down to 4 by 5 1/4, and it's time to assemble our card. I'll use some foam adhesive, foam tape, to adhere that happy birthday to the bottom of the panel. Then I'm using the precision glue to adhere the happy sentiment. Again, I'll use the foam tape on the back of the little paper doll to add a little bit more dimension to the card. Making sure that we have coverage of all of the parts, so when it goes through the mail it doesn't collapse. Next we have the kite. I'll use the Here Arts Precision Glue to adhere the kite. Okay, now what we have left is to adhere that panel onto top folding that white note card, and I'm using craft foam to add dimension. So I'm adding the craft foam on back of the panel and then adhere it to the top folding note card. So here is our final result. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the Here Arts YouTube channel. Also, please visit the Here Arts blog for more ideas and more inspiration. Bye!